Interesting. That's new. Did everyone hear that?
I've never heard that before.
I've never heard that before either. I just hit record and I guess that just makes everyone aware that it's happening. Um, anyway, I need to be careful what I say because this is always the very beginning of the recording when you watch. So, so when it starts, this is what people see right away. So thank you again, Hannah, for taking the time to be with us this morning. She is going to be speaking with us from her position down in Georgia, which is with Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, lovingly referred to as GIPL, as I've discovered. I first met Hannah Shultz on a spring or wintry day in Juniata as I was recruiting for Camp Swatara summer staff, and graciously she joined our team that summer. And it's been a real blessing and pleasure to get to know Hannah over the years. She's recently graduated from Candler Theological Seminary in Emory down in Georgia. So I'll let her give her own introduction, but I just wanted to say she's a beautiful person, and I'm so glad that you're here with us this morning, Hannah. So thank you, and take it away.
Thanks so much, Jason. Thanks for inviting me to be here. It is great to see all of you and be with you this morning. I have a presentation I'm going to share, so I'm going to share my screen and then I'll introduce myself a little bit more. So can you all see this?
Yes.
Great. Okay, awesome. Well, like Jason said, my name is Hannah, and I am the program associate at Georgia Interfaith Power and Light. So I'm excited to be sharing a little bit about my organization and the work that we're doing, but just a little bit about myself. I graduated from Juniata College in 2014 with a degree in religion and anthropology. And it was while at Juniata that I met Jason, and I like to credit Jason with kind of the path that all led me on into the Church of the Brethren. So thank you, Jason, for giving me a shot and just like finding me at Juniata and hiring me to be on Camp Sotara's staff. I worked at camp for 4 summers as a counselor and Bible teacher. And it's really at camp where I kind of discovered my love for nature and the environment and this like deep spiritual connection that we have with God through nature. And so that really kind of set me on my path to the work that I'm doing today. Camp has been an incredible part of my life, and I'm so grateful for the summers that I spent there. As I worked at camp, I kind of worked at camp through college and then a little bit after college as well. Right after I graduated from Juniata, I went into BVS as a volunteer. So I worked in the BVS and work camps office out in Elgin, Illinois, serving as an assistant work camp coordinator for a year. Then I went back to Juniata and worked as a resident director and campus ministry program coordinator. And then in 2016, started at Candler School of Theology at Emory, where I received my Master of Divinity in 2019. And kind of during that process, heard a call from God to more formally join the Church of the Brethren. I grew up Methodist, but I'm now happy to say that I'm a member at Lidditz Church of the Brethren. And so I'm really excited to be connecting with all of you just down the road from Lidditz. So right after graduating from Candler, then I went back to Elgin and worked as the coordinator of short-term service, coordinating the work camp program, which is now called FaithX. So did that for a little over a year, and then felt a call to come back to Georgia and to do this work that I've kind of always felt really drawn to, of doing the work of environmental justice and connecting faith and theology and the environment in that way. And so I've since moved back to Atlanta and am now working at Georgia Interfaith Power and Light. But that's just a little bit about me, and I wanted to share my story and just say that the Church of the Brethren has really formed a lot of my thinking around why this work matters, and particularly from working at camp and from serving in many different roles in work camps and service trips and kind of serving. I've served on a lot of farms doing some food justice work, like coordinating work camps took me all over the country to a lot of amazing projects that were working on farms and working to kind of secure food justice for families. And so all of this like work and experience that I've had with the Church of the Brethren has really shaped my call into the work that I'm doing today, and has helped inform why this matters to us as people of faith. And so I'm excited to be here and excited to tell you a little bit about the work of GIPL and what we're doing in Georgia. And then I will, at the end, tell you a little bit about Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light and ways that maybe you can get involved with one of our partner organizations in Pennsylvania. So just a little bit about us. We were founded in 2003. Our mission statement is to work to equip communities of faith to care for creation through worship, education, and stewardship. Since 2003, we have partnered with over 500 congregations around the state of Georgia in doing this work. We are part of a national organization called Interfaith Power and Light, which was founded in 2000. They are active in almost 40 states. And so we are just one of like the state affiliates of Interfaith Power and Light. So almost every state has a chapter of Interfaith Power and Light. It looks pretty different in every state, just kind of depending on staff capacity and things like that. But their mission is to mobilize a national religious response to climate change, focused specifically on ensuring efficient, sustainable energy for all. So through my work at GIPL, I work as a program associate. I really work primarily with congregations doing presentations such as this and helping to kind of make this connection between theology and care for creation and why this matters to us as faithful people. And so I'm going to start today with that, with this question of what is creation care and why should we matter, or why should it matter to us? So creation care is a faithful response to God's command to be caretakers of the earth. And I think at its core, it starts from seeing the world as created, sustained, and loved by God. To see the world as creation is to treat it in a God-honoring way. We must live more responsibly and engage with the world in a way that reflects its holiness. And one passage that I like to look at when I talk about creation care is from the first creation story in Genesis. I'm going to read just a little bit of scripture from Genesis 1:26 through 31. It says, "Then God said, 'Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over the cattle and over all the wild animals of the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth.' So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, 'Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the earth.' God said, 'See, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast, and to every, sorry, I lost my place here. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, and everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food.' And it was so. God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day." And so I read this passage this morning because I think oftentimes I have heard people kind of quote it as a reason to kind of defend our actions of manipulating the earth's resources for our benefit. They point to the passage, to the words that say, we are told to have dominion over the fish of the sea, to fill the earth and subdue it. But I think looking at this passage through a lens of creation care kind of helps to reorient us, rather than kind of being placed above the created order with everything given to us. Looking at this passage through a lens of creation care helps to recenter us as part of the created order. We are just part of this creation story, just because we are created on the sixth day doesn't mean that we are created any differently than the rest of creation. So we need to see ourselves as part of this interdependence with all creatures on the planet. And we are to see ourselves as having a responsibility toward our shared creation. One part of this passage that really stands out to me is when God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness." We are told that we are made in the image of God. And in that way, we share in the same responsibility that God has. Just as God has responsibility for this whole earth that God has created, we too share in a responsibility to care for all of God's creation. And so I think kind of recentering this passage in that way helps us to understand that our call is not to have dominion over the earth, but it's to be part of the earth and part of this created order, and that we have a responsibility in caring for creation in that way. Similarly, Psalm 104 reminds us that God is continually present to the world, sustaining and blessing God's creation. Healing and sustaining the earth is an integral part of being in relationship with God. And so we are called to do this work because God does this work as well. And then the last part is that creation care really is a confession of the way that we use and abuse the world's resources. We know that human action has contributed to degradation and destruction of the earth and has accelerated climate change. So we need to change our habits and practices to begin to see the earth as God sees it. It's something that is beautiful and good and worthy of being cherished and celebrated. And so that kind of brings us towards our guiding faith principles that we use as an organization at GIPL. And the first one, like I have been talking about, is stewardship, which really just is the responsible use of God's creation. We know that the gifts from the earth help to power our lives, and we are dependent on Earth's resources to live. So we need to ask ourselves if we are using these resources wisely, if we are being good stewards of them. The second faith principle is justice, which is working to ensure fair usage and distribution of natural resources. Creation care at its core is a matter of love and justice. We are called to love our neighbors and to seek justice for our brothers and sisters. Climate change will continue to affect the earth for generations to come, and often the communities who are most affected are the ones who are least able to adapt. If we follow the commandments to seek justice for the entire earth, we are showing love for our neighbors. The third faith principle is community of life, which is understanding our role in the interdependent ecosystem. Our calling as people of faith is to protect and sustain the creation that in turn supports and nurtures humankind. When we become more responsible stewards of our resources, we help our fellow human beings as well as the rest of creation. And then the last faith principle, I think, is my favorite one, and it is awe. So recognizing the fingerprints of the divine in the created works. This beautifully interdependent world that we live in is divine, and the world reflects God's love for all of us. I don't think we spend enough time kind of contemplating the spiritual connection that we have with the natural world and realizing that caring for creation is one way of being in relationship with God and is one way of experiencing God's love for us. I think this is something that I really, that kind of hits home for me, because this is, again, like when I worked at camp, like this is what I felt all the time. This is the place that I've always said that I have felt closest to God, is being out in God's creation, sitting on, the rock pile or being on mountainside, just kind of surrounded by all of God's creation. And I think, we don't spend enough time going outside and kind of taking in a deep breath and looking around and experiencing God in that way. And so this is kind of my favorite faith principle. And what helps to guide me in this work is knowing that we've got to keep nature around, because this is an important way that I connect with the Creator.
How do I get in there? Get down to the
So what does this mean to all of us? Our call as people of faith is to inform ourselves about where our energy comes from and to take responsibility for our actions, to reduce our dependence on fossil fuel energy, to consider the impact of our environmental decisions on marginalized communities, and to advocate for clean energy at all levels of public policy. And so we have a number of ways that we do this work at GIPL. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of our programs today and some of the work that we're doing here in Georgia. So one of our core programs is our Green Team Coaching program and our Green Team program. So we consider a Green Team 3 or more individuals in a congregation who are committed to doing the work of creation care and environmental justice. And we talk about theories of reach a lot. And so what this basically means is that we see this Green Team at kind of being like the core of this work. They are the individuals who are passionate about it, and they're kind of organizing the efforts at like this like very small grassroots level. And then the hope is that the Green Team kind of takes this information and helps to educate the congregation about what they can do and why they should care. And then the congregation can kind of go out to the larger community and can help do education and advocacy in a broader sense. And so we think about starting really small, and Green Teams are such an important part of this work. They're primarily who we work with, and they're the ones who are really committed to doing this. And so we have a Green Team coaching program. So I serve as a Green Team coach to a number of congregations who are either just starting a new Green Team, or who are relaunching their Green Team, or who are just looking for some extra support and structure. So it's a 12-month program, and we provide some strategic planning. I meet pretty regularly with the Green Team leaders and the Green Team themselves, and just help them figure out what their priorities are. I help them evaluate their congregation and figure out what people are passionate about, because I think the best way to do this work is to lean into what people are already interested in, to not try to take on everything at once, but to just pick a couple of things that people are already excited about and see what they can do. So I work with the Green Team, with the Green Teams, to kind of identify some opportunities for education, for incorporating these themes into worship services, and for getting involved with advocacy as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about why advocacy is so important to us later in this presentation. So Green Team coaching and Green Teams are kind of our entry point to working with communities of faith and how we connect with congregations in Georgia. But we also offer a number of other resources to communities of faith. We have a series of education classes and workshops. We offer over 20 classes on a variety of topics, from theology to energy, to the connection between creation care and public health. They are taught by practitioners, professors, and scientists from around the state. And our educational classes are really important to us because this is kind of an entry point to helping congregations just learn a little bit more about why some of these issues matter and to motivate them to be doing this work. We also create any classes that folks want. So if there's a topic that a congregation is interested in, we'll create a class for them on that topic and help educate them a little bit more about that. We also have a class that's associated with a Four Directions Fund, which is some grant money. So participants can participate in this class, and then they're eligible to apply for some grant money to implement some eco projects on their campus. And so I think this is a really important thing that we offer if a congregation is interested in starting composting or starting gardening, but just needs some extra funds to be able to do that work. They can apply for this grant and get some money in that way. And so we really tried to help not just with the education pieces of it, but also helping congregations have the resources to implement some of the things that they want to do. We also have a list of documentaries and film screenings. So a lot of times we'll host a film screening and then a discussion or a letter writing campaign or something like that. Again, just as kind of a way to introduce a topic to a congregation and help them learn a little bit more about it. We also do a lot of work with waste. And this is a new program that we're kind of building out right now, but waste and recycling is a big issue kind of nationally, but also here in Georgia, there are not great recycling programs and options. And so what we really try to do is to work with congregations to figure out how they can reduce the amount of waste that they have on site. So we have a waste audit that we help congregations do just to kind of assess what they're throwing away at their facility, encourage them to go through their trash and kind of sort it out and see what they're throwing away and then ways to divert that waste. So can they, put this stuff in the recycling? Could they start composting some of this waste? Or what are ways to just kind of reduce the amount that you're actually purchasing and buying? And so we have some sustainability policies that we also help them create that involve guidelines around procurement, what they're allowed to buy, just kind of guidelines for what they're bringing onto their facility in order to reduce the amount of waste that they're generating. So that is a big part of our work right now, is helping with waste and waste audits. We also have 3 kind of facility-based programs. And so these are kind of our internal programs that we help congregations kind of assess what they're doing on site, how much energy and water that they're consuming, and helping them think of ways to both lower their energy consumption and their energy costs. So our PowerWise program is the first kind of pilot program that we have. This is usually what we recommend to new congregations that we work with as an entry point into this work. So we know that the inefficient use of electricity and natural gas in our buildings makes up more than 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So reducing the amount of energy that your building uses helps to reduce the environmental injustices that are caused by the improper storage of energy waste and the public health problems associated with coal and natural gas plants in Georgia. And so this is really, like I said, the first step in making a building or campus more sustainable. So how this program works is a congregation will sign up for the PowerWise program. They will send us all of their 13 months of energy bills. We do some assessing. We send an engineer who we contract with to their site. He does a building assessment and then writes an audit report. We go over the audit report with them and help congregations understand the energy efficiency projects that the engineer is recommending. And then we help them to make these building retrofits and upgrades to help them lower their carbon footprint. And energy efficiencies can save up to 20% on energy costs. So this is a great financial benefit to congregations as well. And we have a matching grant fund that helps congregations get some money. They can apply for up to $10,000 in matching grant funds to implement some of these projects on site. The second kind of facility-based program that we have is our SolarWise program. And so again, we are committed as an organization to advancing Georgia's clean energy economy, and expanding access to solar energy is central to this work. So we provide free solar assessments. We help congregations figure out how they could, if they are a good candidate for solar. We help get bids from solar companies. We act as like the liaison between the solar provider, the utility, and other parties, and just really help congregations on every step of this process of getting solar and improving energy efficiencies in that way. The third program that we have is our WaterWise program, which works very similarly to the PowerWise program. We have another engineer who will go to facilities and do water assessments and provide a water audit report with some water efficient upgrades and appliances that can help congregations both save on their water bills and reduce the amount of water that they're consuming on site. So these are kind of the 3 ways that we help congregations assess their facility and kind of their internal structure, and help them reduce their carbon footprint and reduce the amount of water that they're wasting, as a really easy and practical way to make some changes on site to be more environmentally friendly. So those are a little bit about some of our programs. I'm going to switch a little bit to talking about the work of environmental justice and advocacy, because that's an we have, the educational components. We have these facility programs that help congregations assess their buildings and campus. And then we have our advocacy piece. And that's kind of looking at systems and structures and how we can kind of make change at a bigger scale as well. And so what is environmental justice? Environmental justice is the idea that all people and communities, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, have the right to equal environmental protection under law and the right to live, work, and play in communities that are safe, healthy, and free of life-threatening conditions. This basically just means that Communities shouldn't be forced to deal with more pollution just because they belong to a certain race, national origin, or income bracket. However, we know that low-income communities, people of color, the elderly, children, and vulnerable populations disproportionately suffer the economic and health impacts of pollution and other environmental issues. And so as people of faith, we affirm that justice for creation cannot be achieved without fully addressing the environmental injustices impacting our neighbors and communities. And while we know that there's a lot that we can achieve as individuals, sometimes some of these issues are bigger than us, they're systemic. And so what we really need to do is get involved at a public policy level in order to dismantle these systems that perpetuate environmental injustice, environmental degradation, and climate change. And so policy and advocacy is a big part of our work. So we are involved in policy during the legislative session. We'll be down at the Capitol talking to legislators, advocating for bills that advance environmental justice laws and other policies that affect the environment. We do advocacy trainings with congregations as well, so we can kind of teach congregations about how the legislative process works, how to set up lobby meetings with their legislators. We can help congregations host a letter writing campaign if there's a particular issue that they want to learn more about. We kind of provide guidelines and sample letters that they can use. We believe that all of our voices are incredibly powerful, and that this is one of our moral and religious duties, is to get involved in policy change and at this level. And so this is a big part of what we do, as well as helping to equip communities of faith to use their voices, to learn how to talk to their legislators, to find out who their legislators even are, and to also learn a little bit more about some of the bills that are on the table and how they can get involved in this process. And so I'm going to share one example just of kind of how that works and what an example of one of the policy things that we are involved with. So coal ash is probably one of our biggest policy priorities and something that we've been working on as an organization for many years. So coal ash is the sludge-like waste that is left over from burning coal for electricity. And it contains toxins like arsenic, mercury, lead, and other heavy metals. And so basically what happens is coal ash is stored in unlined coal ash ponds adjacent to coal-fired power plants. And oftentimes, as you can see in this diagram, the coal ash, because it's sitting in unlined ponds, it is able to leach into the ground below. It gets into groundwater, then it gets into people's domestic wells. So this is not just an environmental issue. It's not just impacting the earth itself, but it's also a huge public health concern because it is, again, getting into domestic wells and impacting people's drinking water and preventing them from having access to clean drinking water. There are about 29 coal ash ponds in Georgia. So the blue dots on this map are the locations of the coal ash ponds, and the red dots are the locations of landfills that accept coal ash. So you can see that there are a lot of coal ash ponds. A lot of them are also located adjacent to some of our biggest water systems in Georgia. So in the Atlanta area, we've got the Chattahoochee watershed. In the Savannah area, we've got the Savannah River. And then kind of in this Albany area, we've got the Flint River. And so this is a big problem, again, because since these coal ash ponds are located adjacent to our rivers and streams, the coal ash is getting into those water systems and is really impacting a lot of our state. Now, about 19 of these coal ash ponds are currently in the process of being excavated. So this is what we want to see happen. We would love to see all of the coal ash ponds being excavated and moved to these landfills, the red dots on the screen, where they will be stored in dry lined pits where they won't be able to leach into the earth and get into drinking water anymore. However, about 10 of the coal ash ponds have cap in place permits, which just means that the coal ash ponds will be left where they are and a cap will be put on them. which does not solve the problem because they are going to continue to remain in these unlined ponds where the coal ash will continue to be able to get into the groundwater and into drinking water. There are 2 bills on the table right now that will be voted on again in the 2022 legislative session. One of the bills requires the full excavation of all coal ash ponds in Georgia. So this is really what we would like to see passed. And a lot of the policy and advocacy work that we'll be doing in this next year is helping congregations, communities of faith understand about why coal ash is a problem and teaching them how they can talk to their legislators about passing this bill that would require the full excavation of all of the coal ash ponds. And so this is just kind of an example of the work that we do. Another problem that I'll just note with the coal ash, you can see on the right side of the screen, one of the problems is that there's coal ash in other states as well. And a lot of times the coal ash in those other states is being brought here to Georgia. It's actually cheaper for landfills in Georgia to accept coal ash than it is for them to accept household garbage. And so we're not only dealing with our own coal ash that we've produced here, but we're also dealing with coal ash from other states. And so this is a big, again, policy priority of ours. There's a new documentary that's out. It's called Saving Juliet. If you're interested in learning more about the coal ash problem, I definitely recommend you check this out. It's on YouTube. It's a free documentary, and it tells the story of the coal ash problem in Juliet, Georgia, which is kind of outside of Macon on the screen. And there's a coal ash pond that's associated with Plant Shearer, which is one of the largest coal-fired power plants in the country. And basically, the coal ash is leaching into drinking water in the town of Juliet. Water testing revealed that their domestic wells had a contaminant called hexavalent chromium. Their water tested many times over the California legal limit for hexavalent chromium, which is a known carcinogen and a toxin associated with coal ash. So folks in this town were getting really sick and then found out that it's because their drinking water has been contaminated with toxins from the coal ash pond. So this tells a really inspiring story, I think, of why this work matters. And I think, really helps to show why we do the work that we do. It's because this is not just affecting the earth itself, but it's affecting our communities, our neighbors here in Georgia. And then the last thing that I just kind of want to mention about our work, this is an exciting thing that's happening right now, is we're partnering with Drawdown Georgia, which is a statewide initiative to help reduce carbon impact in Georgia by 1/3 by 2030. It comes out of Project Drawdown. If y'all are familiar with Project Drawdown, which is a global movement to help the world achieve drawdown, which is the point in time in which greenhouse gases in the atmosphere stop climbing and actually start to steadily decline. And so Project Drawdown has mapped out about 100 solutions for how to help the world achieve drawdown. Drawdown Georgia took those 100 solutions and scaled them to see what would be achievable here in Georgia, and they have identified these 20 solutions to help Georgia reduce our carbon impact. And so these solutions expand 5 sectors, from electricity to buildings and materials, food and agriculture, land sinks, so increasing our natural forests and woodlands to be able to sequester even more carbon from the atmosphere, and then transportation. And so a lot of our work right now is developing even more programs and policies around these issues specifically to help congregations figure out how they can start to implement some of these solutions at the congregational level. So this is an exciting part of our work right now, is kind of using these solutions as a roadmap to engaging with communities of faith and helping them implement some of these solutions. So that's a little bit about GIPL. I just want to leave you with a couple of ways that you could get involved in this work. I know that you're in Pennsylvania, not in Georgia, but that doesn't mean that you can't start your own green team. So if eTown doesn't have a committee or a group that's kind of dedicated to this work, if you're really excited about what you heard today, this is definitely something that you can do at eTown that you could start. You can also get involved with Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light. So they, I think, are based in State College. At least they were when I was a student at Juniata. They mostly are comprised of part-time staff and contractors, and they rely really heavily on volunteers. So like I said at the beginning of the presentation, each Interfaith Power and Light state chapter functions a little differently. I think Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light is a little bit smaller than us at GIPL, but they are still doing amazing work. One of their big events is an annual bike ride for a cleaner future. That's actually happening right now. So they ride through Pennsylvania to DC to spend a day at the Capitol advocating for a cleaner future. Yesterday, I think, was their advocacy day in DC. So you can support their work or participate in this bike ride in the future, but I definitely encourage you to check them out, paipl.org. You can see what they're doing with communities of faith in Pennsylvania. And if you're interested in supporting my work and our work here at GIPL, we are in the middle of our spring giving campaign. So you can go to our website and donate to support our work at GIPL. So that's all I have. I would love to see if anybody has any questions. I'll stop sharing my screen and would love to hear from all of you.
Regarding coal ash, I understand that there are actually some groups that are looking at finding beneficial uses for it in addition to just preventing ground leaching. Could you talk about any of that?
Yeah, I would love to hear more what you have heard. You know, what our work really is focused on is excavating the ponds and getting the coal ash out of these unlined pits. But I'd be curious of what you've heard that groups are doing with the coal ash.
I'll try to dig out some info.
Yeah, that would be great. I'm not as familiar. I'm sure that there maybe are things that you can do with it, but our work primarily has been focused on excavating the ponds and moving the coal ash to landfills.
And do you know, for the pits that are covered by cap and leave in place, are there scientific studies or estimates to show how much that slows the leaching because of eliminating rainwater?
Yeah, so that is part of what is required when there's a cap in place permit is the power plants need to do groundwater monitoring to be able to assess exactly that, see how much coal ash is continuing to leach into the groundwater. So that is part of, I think that's why there are cap in place permits, is because they're kind of in the process of learning what the effect is when the pits are just capped in place. So that is definitely, that monitoring is part of their work in this.
The best it can do is slow it up. It can't eliminate it.
Exactly, right. So I think, that's how they're justifying the cap in place permits, but that's why we don't see that as a great long-term solution, because we know that it will continue to leach into the groundwater below. Even if it is at a slower rate, that's not going to solve the problem if it's, left in this unlined pit.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I have a question here. Years ago, this is the question. It says, years ago, I realized that the left-leaning tree huggers and the right-leaning stewards of God's creation shared concerns on environmental issues, but they disliked each other. Does your group help unite those sides, knowing that, obviously it's a very divisive time politically? How has your organization kind of operated in that space?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will say that we are a nonpartisan organization. And so really what our work is to kind of bring these sides together in a way that makes this issue non-political. It always is going to be, right? Like, it is a political issue. This is a very like heightened political time that we're living in, I think. But, I think in our work, what we try to do is to help communities of faith, no matter where they are on the political spectrum, understand why this matters to us. I think that's kind of where this environmental justice perspective comes in, is this is not just about the earth or the tree huggers, that's, kind of this left-leaning side, but it's really about people at its core. It's an issue of justice and of love. And so if we can kind of approach this work in that way, and of understanding that this is a matter of caring about people at its core, I think that can help to kind of depoliticize it in some ways. And, what our work really is to do is to bring people together around issues that matter. I've worked with congregations that are, both left-leaning and right-leaning that are saying, coal ash really is a problem. You can see that scientifically, you can see that from hearing the stories of folks who are affected by it. And so kind of in that way, bringing these sides together around something that matters to all of us here in Georgia. And so, we do try to walk that line. We're not, like I said, we are a nonpartisan organization. And so it is important to us that in our work, we are, working with both sides and just really helping to educate people about some of these issues and hoping to bring folks together to kind of see that we're united in our concern for some of these issues. I hope that helps to answer the question.
Hannah, in your work with churches and kind of helping them think about their own footprint, I know a lot of churches don't have solar panels on their roof or geothermal systems. Do you ever help them kind of source their electricity in ways that come from green sources? Like instead of, I don't know how like the power grid works in Georgia. I know in PA there's options about where you can get your electricity, and I'm not sure. I'm just wondering if that's ever a conversation about where churches get their power from, trying to get it from green sources, even if they don't do it themselves. Have you ever worked with any of that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So really, Georgia Power holds the monopoly here in Georgia. So it's difficult.
Okay.
And we don't have true community solar. Georgia Power doesn't offer that. So community solar is kind of a way to do what you're saying of like buying into a solar system without having solar yourself.
Right.
But Georgia Power doesn't offer a true community solar program. And so one of our like policy pieces is around that and working with the Public Service Commission, who kind of oversees Georgia Power we advocate to the Public Service Commission to ask them to force Georgia Power to have some better options for exactly what you're saying, because options really are limited to kind of buy into this greener power without doing so. That's why we're kind of so focused on these energy efficiency retrofits and things like that, because that's really the best way right now as things stand in Georgia to reduce that energy consumption.
I'm curious if anyone in this group knows anything about that. Am I correct that in Pennsylvania there's different options for where you can source your electricity and you have the ability to source your power from green sources, is my understanding. So even for churches that don't have, like I said, solar power or geothermal systems, they can still generate their electricity from more green sources, I believe, which is a good option.
Yeah, that's great. I know there is one company, I can't remember the name, Acadia maybe. There is one other company that I've heard a couple of congregations work with instead of Georgia Power, but I've heard that it's really difficult and complicated. Yeah. So that's great that there are options like that in Pennsylvania. They
too may be difficult and complicated, I'm not sure. I know it's the power, it's interesting here in PA. Anyone who pays an electric bill knows that there's always different people clamoring to get you to switch or to change and to do that kind of stuff. So that's our experience in PA. other thoughts or comments or questions for Hannah? Oh, in the comment section, yeah, so that is an option to source our power in that way, and we should all be doing that. So there are ways to do that by contacting your power providers.
What time?
A little after 10.
Just another comment on coal ash. If you Google it, beneficial use of coal ash, it'll talk about studies that show it can be used in wallboard and Portland cement substitutes and a few other items. So for your people looking at excavating the pits anyway,
Yeah, thank you.
Might be some connections there that would help get it out of the ground system altogether.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I will definitely look into that. I'm not familiar with that, so I'm really curious what you can do with it, because even just having it sit in landfills is probably not great if there are ways to be able to utilize it.
Other thoughts, questions, or comments? We have a few minutes left here if anyone wanted to chime in with anything else.
Yeah, I think this is an excellent presentation this morning. I appreciate and really enjoyed it. It's an interest that it's a topic that I have some real interest in myself. And I'd like to see something happen at E-Town, maybe form a committee. And with the building plans that are being considered at E-Town, I think this would be a good time to incorporate some of these things. I know that they can be costly, but in the short run, but in the long run and for our world, it could be very beneficial. So that's just a comment I'd like to throw out.
I'll note in the comment section, it says, I believe the church changed providers several years ago to a green energy generator, thanks to the efforts of Karen Wanger and our resources team.
That's great.
And I do know that there was and perhaps still is a green team at E-Town. So I need to look into that. I know there were some individuals who were working on some of those things with the pandemic and with not meeting in person within the building. Perhaps some of those responsibilities have shifted.
Yeah, that's great. I think, the other thing that I just want to say is, celebrate what you're already doing. It sounds like your congregation is already taking steps to be more sustainable. And so, although I think, there's always more that we can do, it's also important to celebrate what you're already doing and to recognize that, because, communities of faith have a lot of ability to enact change in their communities. And so I think to showcase and celebrate and talk to people about what you're already doing is great, and is a good way to a good entry point into this work is to kind of do an assessment and be able to even tell the rest of the congregation, if folks don't know that you do, that you've changed providers to a green energy generator, that's something to share, to let your congregation know that that's already happening.
All right. I think that is pretty much all we have for this morning. Hannah, if you have any more parting words for us as a faith community that is interested in considering the ways in which we have an impact on and are a part of the natural world around us, I want to say thank you for being with us, and I'll let you kind of just offer us some some parting words before we head out. But thank you so much for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation, Jason. It was so good to see all of you and to connect with you. So thank you for letting me share about our work. I would just say that this is important work that we're doing, that I think we are called as people of faith to care for God's creation, because at its core, this natural world is a gift from God, and we need to treat it as such. And so my parting words are really to find that thing that you're interested in, whatever it is, and to figure out what you can be doing about it, and to know that you have incredibly powerful voices as individuals and as communities of faith to enact change at an individual and congregational level. And so I encourage you in this work, and hope that you have been inspired to do something, to take action, and to, live into this calling that we've received by God, to be caretakers of our planet.
Excellent. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you so much for being with us. A reminder to everyone, next week, we will not be meeting on Memorial Day weekend. We will not be gathering together for Sunday school. We will be having our final, well, maybe not final, but we'll be having our outdoor gathering together on May 30th before we join together on June 6th for indoor worship for the first time, with our live stream still happening. So that'll be an exciting time. One thing to note is that on June 6th, we will be shifting the start time of this adult Sunday school class from 9:15 back to 9 a.m. Okay, so adult Sunday school class will be running from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. starting on June 6th, so that any of you who are interested in participating in this adult Sunday school via Zoom can also have time, if you're local, to get here to church if you are interested in joining us in person. You can, of course, stay home in your jammies and join us on the live stream. Will always continue to be an option. Thank you all very much. Hopefully we'll see you soon when we get started with worship. Blessings. Peace. Thanks, Hannah.